Welcome to the seminar today. We're going to talk about combating fraud through month-end close, and I know the audience here, not everyone is in finance and accounting, and you guys are coming from very different backgrounds, and that's okay. I do have some sort of accounting and finance-related methods in terms of combating fraud, but this is a pretty general session, so sit back, relax. So today we're going to talk about fraud, which is interesting because when I arrived yesterday, I think like half the vendors were very fraud oriented, and I know there's a lot of fraud experts here today. So I think to say that fraud is on the rise is probably like a huge understatement. On a typical day for a typical company, it is estimated that we're losing about 5 to 6% of our top line revenues to theft or fraud type activities. And that is if you're just talking about any old company, if you're talking about any old year. So we're talking about non-pandemic year. Last year, the SEC reported that they got, I think, a total of 12,210 tips through their whistleblower program. So this would be individuals reporting on misconduct or wrongdoing into the SEC whistleblower hotline, the official hotline, upon companies that are registered with the SEC, so mostly public. They received over 12,000 tips, which is 77% more tips than they got in fiscal year 2020. And in fiscal year 2020, they received 6,900 tips, which is 33% more than what they got the year before. So, I think it's safe to say that fraud is for sure on the rise. And again, this is pertaining to mostly public companies, private companies, companies that are in the non-for-profit space, financial services institutions. They are actually typically more of a target for occupational fraud. And we were just talking about Netflix earlier this morning at breakfast, but Hollywood has really picked up on this trend, and they have really sensationalized some of our biggest scams. So anything from the Bernie Madoff story to the infamous Elizabeth Holmes to the beloved McDonald's monopoly rigging. It's a lot of drama, but I think it also does a really great job of heightening awareness of corporate fraud to those who are like not in this space, right? Not in treasury, not in risk mitigation, not in legal, not in accounting. And as I was researching this topic, because speaking of Hollywood, they themselves have been the victim to some scams as well. So on the left-hand side here, this guy, his name is Michael Kale, and he, this story broke last year, and he was, or he used to be, the VP of Internet Technology at Netflix. So part of his job was to evaluate and approve vendors and contracts for Netflix's shows, for their streaming platform. So obviously he was very popular. So he used, I think over the course of about 3 years, he used his position at Netflix to basically just take bribes. He took over $500,000 worth of bribes, kickbacks. I think there were expensive gifts that he also accepted. I think at some point he also accepted stock options from Silicon Valley tech companies, from those who are just really eager to partner up with Netflix because it's very lucrative. So he was found out. Internally, he was confronted by what was the CEO of Netflix at the time. He left his company, and he was criminally persecuted. He ended up getting 30 months in prison, and he also had to forfeit the $3 million home that he bought while he was at Netflix. This guy over there, Zach Avery, his real name is Zach Horwitz. He's a small-time actor, but he was very talented at something else. So in 2015, this story actually first broke last year, and then this year he was sentenced. So in 2015, he formed a production company and started marketing himself as someone who could make like a lot of money by investing in film rights. So the way the business model would work is that he needs about $1 million per film, so he would get it from his investors, and then he would turn around and buy the rights of movies for distribution in Latin America, and then he would turn around very quickly within 6 months to a year and sell those rights to like a Netflix or an HBO. So as part of his pitch process, he was showing all his investors and potential investors like all these contracts that he has with Netflix, and his production company, and all the legal emails that was going back and forth between the two legal parties. And he ended up being very successful, as you can see from the headline, but not by selling any film rights. Essentially what he ended up doing, I don't know if he tried to sell film rights or not, but he didn't really even have a contact into these companies. And what he just ended up doing is taking the money that was coming from the newest investors and paying the old investors. And this ended up being a $650 million pyramid scheme. And it was actually going really well for him for a while. So in 2019, he, for whatever reason, stopped paying his investors. And they got mad. And one investor group, I believe out of Chicago, decided to sue him. And as part of the litigation process, they wrote Netflix to request all these documents, the contracts and whatnot. And then Netflix was just like, who is this guy? We don't know him. And then that was found out that is basically all fabricated contracts and fake documents and whatnot. And I think when they arrested him April of last year, they went through all of his personal and corporate bank accounts. And at the time, it's really not clear where the money went, because I think he had like $4,000 between all 4 accounts. So